While Heidi and I have sailed on Viking Ocean and even one of the cruise line's expedition ships, recently we took our first ever Viking River Cruise. And while we're familiar with the cruise line ships on other bodies of water, there were several things that surprised us about sailing on a Viking Longship. So whether you're new to cruising in general or new to river cruising, we put together this video to share our Viking River Cruise tips and the things we wish we knew before we stepped on board up next. Welcome aboard, cruisers. I'm Don B from Eat Sleep Cruise, where we help you see the world one port at a time. And of course, if you have any questions about cruising, Viking, or river cruises, please leave them in the comment section below. We answer every single question. Recently, Viking instituted a brand new no announcement policy as of March 2024. The cruise line has reduced the number of ship-wide announcements by instituting this silent ship approach. Now, the cruise line will only make announcements for essential updates. So long gone are the in-cabin announcements for tour group meeting times and onboard activities. So when an announcement is made, everyone on board knows it's essential. We're fans of this quieter approach. However, it does require a little more attention on your part to ensure you don't miss out on anything. Each evening, the cruise line provides tour information and your tickets for the following days included or optional tours. There's also a print version of the daily program left in your stateroom, along with information provided in the Viking Voyager app. Now, given there are no longer ship-wide announcements, using the Viking Voyager app and having a paper copy of the daily becomes even more critical. When compared to other cruise lines, the Viking Voyager app is rather basic, but it does contain the most pertinent information and basically gets the job done. The app allows cruisers to see the daily schedule, the breakfast, lunch, and dinner menus for the entire voyage, plus a list of your booked excursions and additional tour options. It's also easy to use, so even though it's relatively simple, it serves its purpose. Not to mention, there is still that daily magazine with all the activities and tours delivered to your stateroom each night. So unlike a lot of cruise lines where pre-cruise downloading the app is essential for doing certain things, you actually need to use Viking's website to do your check-in as well as to book tours. But be sure to download the app and add your Viking voyage information prior to boarding the ship, because the app will come in handy once on board. Most ocean cruise ships have a list of prohibited items that guests are not allowed to bring on board. Many of these restrictions are also true on Viking River Cruises. Items like candles and irons are still prohibited. However, one significant departure from mainstream cruising is that Viking River Cruises allows guests to bring drinks and food on board. Viking actually allows guests to bring an unlimited number of alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages with them on their sailing. And this Viking River Cruise tip works anytime during the trip as well. Yes, guests can board with these items on embarkation day, or pick them up at a port of call at any point during the sailing. So if you want a few bottles of wine from town, or a 6-pack of the local brew, that's not an issue. The same applies to food items from a local bakery or a cheese shop. Best part is there are no corkage fees. And in fact, the onboard crew will be happy to serve any spirits or drinks you brought on board during the trip at no additional cost. With over 80 cruises under our belts, we spent countless hours in line during cruise embarkation day. So it was a relief that the embarkation process on our Viking River Cruise was quick and efficient. In total, it took about 15 minutes. In fact, most of this process occurred right on board the ship. No need for tons of documents or checkpoints. After our Viking transfer from the airport to the embarkation point, we walked right onto the river ship. Guest services checked our passports, handed over our keys, and we were off to our stateroom. Our luggage was also delivered minutes later. Of note, you do want to make sure to complete the pre-cruise check-in, providing your preferences and necessary documentation. As part of the cruise line's inclusions, which we'll get to a little bit later in this video, cruisers who book flights with the cruise line also get complimentary bus transfers to and from the airport. This is where Viking service and seamless travel begins. A Viking representative was at the airport waiting for us, and approximately 25 other cruisers who also had overnight non-stop flights. Arriving at the ship, our program director, Mia, welcomed this batch of travelers on board. Our luggage was taken from the bus to the ship, where we were quickly reunited with it in our stateroom. Similar to Viking Ocean, the first night of most river cruises is an overnight stay in the embarkation city. This gives cruisers all day to arrive, and even some of the next day if there are flight delays. So booking a pre-cruise hotel stay is unnecessary unless you want to extend your trip. Now, when it comes to packing, we weren't sure what to expect regarding the vibe on board the ship. So we were surprised to find the atmosphere was casual and relaxed. Most days consisted of tours and sightseeing, and the dress code on the ship fit that bill. You'll find plenty of travel wear from brands like Eddie Bauer, Columbia, and Patagonia. As New Englanders, we were also rocking some Vineyard Vines and LL Bean attire. Most cruisers did change up for dinner, but the attire was mainly slacks and a button-down shirt for the men. Women were wearing similar attire as well. We did not see many sports coats or dresses this trip. With some long days in port, the last thing most cruisers want to do is don their elegant attire on a river cruise. Like ocean cruise ships, Viking River Cruise packages include one free tour at each port of call. So for our 7-night cruise, there were 6 included shore excursions. These ranged from a comprehensive walking tour of downtown Rouen to a bus tour of Paris. The quality of the tours did vary. We were disappointed that our time in Paris was primarily spent experiencing the city through a pane of glass. While we had plans to see more of the city on our own, the weather did not cooperate later in the week. Further, there are no privileged access to sites like the Louvre or the Palace of Versailles, meaning our tour was among the mobs of other tourists at these sites. But we thoroughly enjoyed our walking tours in villages like Les Andelys and our self-guided tour of the Chateau in La Roche-Guyon. We also had a very long but informative day retracing the path of Allied forces during World War II, visiting the beaches of Normandy and a World War II museum. Cruisers are placed into groups for the included tours, and you are with most of these same guests for the duration of the trip, so you get to know these people quite quickly. As a side note, anytime you see a Viking tour labeled panoramic, it's most likely a bus tour. So if given the option, we would opt for something different if you prefer a more active day in that port of call. As part of these tours, guests are each given a quiet box. These small devices allow tour guides to provide you with narration and information in large groups without having to shout. Each guest on a Viking River ship receives a device and a brand new earbud in their stateroom. Most cruisers wear quiet boxes with that wired headset while roaming the streets or browsing a museum. However, one of our Viking River Cruise tips is that you may use a Bluetooth connection for wireless headphones. We use AirFly when connecting to in-flight entertainment, or we want to use our AirPods on devices with a 3.5mm audio jack. This AirFly device can also attach to a quiet box. Of course, cruisers can also use their personal headsets if you prefer, but do remain mindful of your surroundings. This is why the headphones provided by Viking are only for one ear. As 40-something cruisers, we admittedly are not in the most incredible shape. We barely survived the treks in Antarctica or hikes in the Caribbean. But the Viking River walking tours tended to be very slow pace. While some river cruise lines offer tours of various activity levels, Viking only provides one level for included tours. Of note, some tours do offer an accessible option for those with mobility issues. But once we got into the groove, this pace wasn't a big issue for us, as we could go ahead or stay behind the tour, taking photos or exploring a bit more on our own. With the earpiece and the constant narration, we knew we could catch up to the tour. There was only one point in Rouen where the tour moved on and the narration in my earpiece got a little fuzzy. So I knew it was time to turn back and head towards the rest of the group. So if you're okay with a tour that takes time and doesn't go far, you will fit right in. If not, almost all the ports of call we visit could easily be navigated with one of the provided maps or a smartphone app. In addition to the included tours, the cruise line knows guests want to explore at their leisure. That is why the cruise line offers maps at each port of call. During our cruise, guests could grab a map at guest services or from a crew member at the gangway exiting the ship. Along with some points of interest, The maps also detail the ship's location. No, the map doesn't include the location of the nearest Diamonds International. But the cruise line also wants to ensure guests return safely to the ship. So if you like to wander on your own, this Viking River Cruise tip is for you. With potentially spotty cell service, the cruise line offers guests small cards that fit in a lanyard or your wallet at each port of call. These cards include the local number for the ship and the address. So if cruisers ever need assistance getting back from town, they can hand the card to a taxi driver or someone at a local tour office. We often took pictures of the cards to have in our phones, and we recommend you do the same. Similar to our Antarctica cruise with Atlas Ocean Voyages, our Viking River Cruise encountered some atypical weather. At the end of the sailing, the river levels were too high, so we were not able to dock back in Paris. Instead, the ship docked about 30 minutes away in Le Pec. This did mean a change to our tour times for the day. Also, it impacted travelers looking to walk around Paris for the final day. While the cruise line did provide a shuttle, it wasn't the same as spending the last night on board with a view of the Eiffel Tower from our ship. Also, given the time of year, one of the included tours wasn't running yet. The alternative tour was instead a stop in a small village, which was the final home of Impressionist painter Vincent van Gogh. While our tour guide was great, this swapped out tour was perhaps my least favorite. Either way, on a river cruise, weather and river conditions can impact the trip. So one of our tips is to be flexible and just roll with the current. During our cruise, we stayed on deck 2, the middle deck, in a veranda stateroom. It was nice to have the semi-private outdoor space, even if it barely fit the 2 chairs and table. The cabin with the veranda has a total square footage of 205 feet. While it contained many features of a stateroom you'd find on any ocean ship, it did feel smaller in comparison. So if you are used to cruising on ocean ships, don't be surprised by the cabin size on a Viking River Cruise. Still, there was plenty of storage space for our clothes. Immediately entering the room was a closet with one section of shelves and another with clothes hangers. While compact, the bathroom contained a nice glass enclosed shower and the line's signature heated tile floors. While squeezing between the bed and the long desk and dresser took some maneuvering, it was still a comfortable home away from home during our Seine River Cruise. Thankfully, you can get creative to maximize your space with items like magnetic hooks. On every cruise, we always pack these handy accessories, which can be used to hang bags, jackets, hats, and other items. As mentioned, we could unpack and store all our clothes and gear for this week-long trip without too much difficulty. But Viking does offer river cruises that span 2 weeks, not to mention pre- and post-cruise extensions that can add even more days to your vacation. So we were surprised that Viking Longships do not have self-service laundry, especially since both ocean and expedition ships offer laundrettes. Of course, cruisers can pay to have their laundry done for them, but it's not cheap. The cost on a per item basis is on par with contemporary cruise lines, which charge between $5 to $8 for laundering an article of clothing. Only guests in suites get complimentary laundry service, and honestly, Longships have very few of these accommodations. Thus, cruisers should plan to pack enough clothes for the voyage. Speaking of packing, given the laundry situation and the fluctuation in temperatures and weather conditions, it's important to pack layers. Regardless of the season, you should be prepared for various weather conditions. This means bringing lightweight packable clothing to layer, as well as items like suntan lotion and bug spray. Viking does provide umbrellas, but they are pretty cumbersome to carry around, so packing your own rain gear is a good idea too. What you wear on the ship will depend on your temperature regulation. While many fellow cruisers felt the ship was cold and actually wore sweaters, we thought the exact opposite. We actually felt the ship was rather warm, so we didn't end up wearing many of the nighttime clothing items that we packed. Do keep in mind that even in the summer, the mornings and evenings can get cool, especially on the upper decks or your balcony as the ship is sailing to the next port of call. So, pack accordingly. Dining on Viking River Cruises was different than we expected. We sailed on smaller ocean ships with open dining. But even those experiences did not prepare us for how meals worked on this voyage. All meals are served as open seating in the restaurant or the aquavit terrace. Given the weather, the terrace was not open much, so there were fewer tables inside this more casual dining spot. This meant for most meals, all cruisers dined in the restaurant. Here, there are no tables for two, only large tables of 6 or more guests. Thus, you need to make some friends. Throughout the cruise, guests did tend to gravitate to the same groups and tables for dinner, so by the end of the week, cliques had formed in several sections of the main dining room. For the most part, travelers on our Viking River Cruise were friendly and talkative, but it's hard to escape others during mealtimes. So if you're shy or want a quiet dinner, that may not be easy to do during the sailing. On Viking River ships, there are 2 restaurants that serve the same menu. The meals occur at predictable times, and everyone's on the same schedule. Breakfast is served at 7 a.m., lunch is at noon, and dinner's at 7 p.m. Actually, we were surprised by the lack of dining options. On our previous Viking sailings, there was a buffet setup where we could grab a quick bite without the sit-down service. However, that is not the case on Viking River ships. There's also no specialty dining and no room service. Thus, if you have 2 tours in a day, it can feel hectic, hustling back to get something to eat before returning to land for further exploration. The Aquavit Terrace did have some bakery and continental items for breakfast, so we appreciate the ability to grab some food here and then grabbing some espresso from the self-service machines before heading out on a tour. But there are no grab-and-go food selections during the day or at night. Basically, if you don't want to eat at the restaurant at the set dining times, you don't have any other option besides the cookies at the coffee station. Also, we did feel the restaurant menus were a tad limited, with a few standard items that remained on the menu and a few daily specials. However, Heidi was able to order a piece of grilled chicken one afternoon, even though it wasn't on the menu, so speak to your waiter, or heck, speak to the chef, because you'll actually see him throughout the ship. Let them know if you have any dietary restrictions or requests at the beginning of the trip. As we mentioned, most cruisers partake in the organized tours and open seating at meals, so everyone on board gets to know each other. With about 162 other cruisers, you will have seen everyone on board by the middle of the week, for better or worse. Even if you haven't officially met them, you will quickly recognize them when walking around the ship or ashore. For most, saying hi or striking up a quick conversation with another guest is part of cruising. But unlike larger ships, there's no blending into the crowd or escaping if you don't feel like being social one night. The one place to truly do that is your stateroom. Ocean cruising is one of the best forms of travel for those with mobility issues. On the other hand, river cruises are not the most accessible. Arguably, most of Europe and many of the landmarks and historic destinations in these countries are not wheelchair friendly either. Even for those with minor mobility issues, getting around many villages we visited with the hills and cobblestone walkways could be challenging. We did not see many walkers or wheelchairs on our Seine River cruise. However, Viking Radgrid did have a small elevator. It could only accommodate a couple of passengers at a time though. So even though the ship only has 4 decks, most passengers take the stairs. Still, if you have your heart set on going on a river cruise, it is certainly possible to get around the ship with an assistive device. Being in our early 40s, we were among the ship's youngest cruisers. While most ocean ships have a median passenger age in the mid-50s, it wouldn't be a stretch to say that during our Viking River cruise, the median was probably in the 70s. For the most part, they were still lively, engaging, and definitely well-traveled folks. Given the long days ashore and late dinners, we retired for the night shortly after. So honestly, Heidi and I fit right in with this crowd. One thing we do like about Viking is that it is adults only. While some travelers did bring their kids, these were actually adult kids, and often some of them were older than us. Along with the laid-back embarkation, getting on and off the ship is also very casual. Cruisers can come and go as they please at each port of call. There's often no crew member manning the embarkation point. All cruisers need to do is swipe in and out at a kiosk with their room keycard. However, getting back on board, make sure you do have that key card, as often the doors to the ship are locked. But there are no long queues, metal detectors, or airport-style screeners to worry about when coming back from a day ashore. Just keep in mind that sometimes Viking River cruise ships will dock next to each other, so it is possible you'll need to walk through another ship to get to your vessel. If this is the case, a team member is usually there to ensure you're on the right boat. You'll probably figure it out as your key card won't work when you attempt to scan yourself back on the ship if you're in the wrong place. Viking ensures guests are well taken care of on and off the ship. The cruise fare includes all dining on the ship, a range of non-alcoholic drinks, and specialty coffees and teas throughout the day. However, the coffee is at a self-service kiosk in the main atrium. The cruise fare includes beer and wine at lunch and dinner as well. If you're looking for further alcoholic beverage options, there's also the cruise line's inexpensive Silver Spirits package. So it doesn't take much to upgrade to a truly all-inclusive cruise experience. Unlike most ocean cruises nowadays, there's still twice daily room service on Viking River cruises. Like the old days of cruising, our room attendant was like a ninja, finding time to make up our room when we were out for short periods of time. Along with everything else, all cruisers get unlimited Wi-Fi for one device. The internet worked much better than our last Viking sailing, and the onboard staff did confirm it was Starlink technology. I was able to easily switch from my phone to my laptop when I had some work emails to check. While the speeds were acceptable, they were not fast enough for streaming videos. However, I was able to upload a video to YouTube over the span of a couple days. Given that all Viking Longships are essentially interchangeable, cruisers are truly sailing for the destination with the ship as the backdrop. Still, Viking allows its guests to explore the world in comfort. On Viking Radgrid, the service was friendly and attentive. Servers quickly learned individuals' preferences and taste. Given that there are only around 160 cruisers and about 55 crew, it's really like one big family. That being said, there are not many public spaces or amenities on these ships. While the ships have a sun deck with loungers and a walking track with some green spaces, Viking Longships do not have a pool, a spa, or fitness centers. Besides the two dining venues, the only other public area is the lounge, which is also the main bar and entertainment space. There were a few organized activities during the day. Even in the evenings, we expected some enrichment sessions, but it was mostly just the daily port talk. On 3 occasions, local performers performed after dinner in the lounge. Mia, the program director, hosted a version of Majority Rules one night, which was a lot of fun, but that was the extent of the entertainment. So while our first Viking River cruise was not exactly what we expected, we still had a fantastic time. While it's different than ocean cruising, there are still many similarities that made us feel right at home. We enjoyed exploring off the beaten locales that we could never visit on larger ships. While there's less offered on board, there's plenty to do and see ashore. After watching this video, we're sure you want to book a Viking River cruise. But before you do, you will want to check out our brand new Viking River Cruise review video right here on YouTube. In that video, we share what it's really like sailing on a Viking Longship for a full week. We go into greater detail about the dining, onboard amenities, the stateroom, and more. That way, you're one step ahead of everyone else on board, and your Viking River cruise will be smooth sailing.